Hey there, and happy Monday, or Black Metal Monday as I like to call it. I haven't done one in a while. It's not really a collection update per se, because I'm only talking about one record today. I actually wasn't planning on doing any sort of a review for this album because the people that know me really well know that I have a very biased opinion when it comes to Panopticon. Uh, it's by far my favorite black metal band, um, or project, because it's just Austin. Um, and I've said that several times on this channel. I've shown off a pretty large portion of his albums that he has put out over the years, and I pretty much just knew that as soon as this was announced that this album was probably going to be my favorite album for the year, and I was dead on with that. But then after listening to it this weekend several times, because I got the album in super early, which is awesome. Um, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna talk about it on the channel. I want to get more people to listen to it and know about it and buy it because it's still available, and it comes out officially this Friday, November 29th. So I got a full week here before the official release date. But Panopticon, if you're not familiar, is a atmospheric black metal band that infuses that folky sound into it. He himself, Austin Lunn, who I actually did a stream with on Heavy Metallurgy a year ago, officially, and I'll link it in the description if you want to go back and watch it. We talked mostly, it was all about death metal, which is funny, in that stream. But he is, I like to call a black metal, atmospheric black metal magician, in that he writes albums that often relate to me personally, and I end up falling in love with them, and he continuously gets better further into his career of writing music and making music. So he's got 10 full-length albums out. This one, the Rime of Memory, is the 10th. His first one was just a self-titled Panopticon that came out in 2008. And some of my favorite albums are Collapse, which was the second full-length. Social Disservices was my favorite for a while there. I listened to that album a lot. Kentucky is incredible. I think that that's a fan favorite across the board. Audium Eternal is another one that I really, really love. And then most notably his last release back in 2021, and to Get Into the Light, which I unfortunately was a little bit late into getting to listen to. I think it came out pretty much late into the year too, so by then I think I had been burnt out on new releases. But since then I've been listening to the album a ton, and that album I think ended up becoming my favorite in the discography after listening to it over and over and over again. But every single album that he has in his whole entire career has something attached to it that makes it incredible in its own way, and just his songwriting and the subject matters that he writes about, and just there's always some sort of personal connection that I have with these albums that just they stick with me, and I often, that's why I say, like, this is my favorite black metal band. And this album is no exception. So before I get talking about the music, here is the record itself. I actually really, really enjoy the album cover. I saw some people knocking it in their like written reviews that it's a little bit bland. I think in general, understanding the theme of the album and listening to the music, I think it goes pretty well in that regard. It's just a wintry landscape with is that a crow? I can't remember if it's a crow or not. Birds, and then in the back is more wintry landscapes with the song names. It's got that like spot gloss that Bindroom does often with their jackets, and then in the gatefold is that. The one thing that I really love about Panopticon's albums is that Austin generally goes into extreme detail about the writing process and what the theme and overall meaning of this album, what the album is, and that still continues on within this record here. There is a nice little booklet with all the lyrics, and then a big long, essentially forward, I guess you could say, or introduction, where Austin writes about the overall like meaning of this album, in the sense that it has pretty much two different meanings, essentially life and death, the whole process of growing old and dying, and then environmental mayhem for the most part. So yeah, he said basically the way he ends this message, and you can also read this on the Bandcamp because it's on the Bandcamp as well, and I think it's also on the Binder and Recordings website in regards to this. But he says, each day is sacred as we slowly march towards the end. Don't forget to enjoy the beauty you see, smell, taste, and feel along the way. It won't last forever, so enjoy it, cherish it, protect it. Don't let the fire burn out. So I love that he's a very captivating writer in his lyrics and across the board when he's talking about the music that he's writing. And like I said, it says this album has two meanings. You can see the album solely as a rant about climate crisis and wilderness advocacy, or you can see this album as a coming to terms with the aging process, or as I do, you can see it as basically both, being both. So it's got a twofold here, and going into that, I think that made this a little bit more of an easier, digestible listen, because I will be honest with you, if you're expecting this to be something that it'll automatically click and grasp if you've never heard a Panopticon before, that may not be necessarily the case here. There's a lot to digest with this album, and it is not, I would say, a very easy listen if you're not familiar with his style of writing and his music. And if you're just kind of looking more for like that cookie cutter atmospheric black metal that's out there, it's oversaturated, to be honest with you. This is complex at the highest regard, in my opinion. So there is a really nice booklet that, like I said, it has all of the lyrics and, more landscapes. And then there's the bird. And then it is a double LP, which absolutely could have probably been 3 LPs because this is a pretty lengthy album with a really nice butterfly splatter. They both look the same, so I'm not going to show you the other one. So it's a really, really nice pressing, and they're still available, so go to Binder Recordings and order it. It is shipping, obviously, because I got it already, and I've seen a lot of people have it already, and I will link that in the description. So, yeah, the music. So, opening right away on this album, I really love that folk aspect of black metal when bands intertwine it, and Austin does that amazing. There's that bluegrass, folky guitar that really starts off this album with the strings. There's violin and cello, and the strings on this album, which I think he pretty much had somebody like a session musicians come in and play those parts. He didn't actually play those parts, but he does everything else: the drums, guitars, vocals, flute. There's like every instrument you could possibly think of, but the violins and cellos, and there's even a choir on here. Obviously he didn't do all that, but the strings on this album are by far one of my favorite things about it. They're all throughout the whole entire album. They create a dynamic and an emotional connection here that makes it just a very epic album as a whole. Yes, they are very, violin and cello and stuff like that are typically associated with like more prettier sounding music, but this is a very bleak album, and they go really well with that. There's more of a sorrowful, somber sound to this album. I would say it's even darker than the last album, and again, Into the Light, which was about mental illness and overcoming that, and that was a very personal and emotional and darker album as well. But this one somehow manages to go a little bit even more bleaker and a little bit more darker, which I was surprised about. I thought that last album was his probably more emotional, darker album that he has done for a while. He somehow managed to go even more bleaker into that emotional like heartstring tugging. So the beginning of this album I was sucked in immediately because I love, like I said, that folky bluegrass that he incorporates into his sound. But Winter's Ghost is the next song, and that is just a phenomenal song. It's got the bluegrass style guitars in there. The strings are still there. There's even this clean singing that he does that's just simply phenomenal. But it's a very slow build-up song, and then it gets to this exploding black metal that's just heavy and emotional, and it's just it's that ebbs and flow that I always talk about with longer songs, it has that build up that to what you're waiting for, and then it gets there. But the ending is what really captivated me because it goes back into that slower emotional style of music. And then this choir comes in and starts singing, and it's just a very emotional song. I got goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps now talking about it. It's just a fantastic song. I forgot to mention this is a 6-song album, but it is an hour and 15 minutes long. So again, it's a very long album, and normally I would knock an album that is super long like that because that it takes a lot for a person to go through an album that long. But I will be honest with you, I didn't feel like it. It didn't feel like an over an hour long album when I was listening to it, and I think that's because I was so into it and just loving everything I was listening to. And eventually, when it ended, I was like, well, time to play this again, and I just put the first LP back on and played it again. Some people may find the issue with that. So I guess it just depends on, what kind of person you are. Do you prefer an album to be 30, 40 minutes, or you don't mind if it's a little bit longer? I don't think that this is an album that should have been cut down or trimmed out or, maybe had removed a song. I don't think there's any song here that doesn't fit or considered it filler or anything like that. Austin typically doesn't write music like that. Everything flows really well together. And yeah, they are longer songs, but it's good. And I think that it fits the mold of Panopticon perfectly, and I don't have any issues with the album length at all. The next song that I wanted to talk about, I'm not going to go through song by song because, I don't need to make this a 30-minute long review of me talk because it easily could do that because there's a lot to talk about here. Cedar Skeletons is an amazing song. It's available on Bandcamp. You can go ahead and listen to it. This is one of the first songs I heard, one of the singles, I guess you could say. And this is essentially that climate change / wildfire advocacy song. It's very clear as day. This is about the wildfires that happened in Minnesota, which is where Austin currently lives. There was some sort of really bad wildfire that happened, and I can't remember how long ago it was. I know it was fairly recently, and just pretty much was decimating. It was awful, and that's been happening a lot in this continent, I guess you could say. Canada had a bunch of crazy wildfires not that long ago, to the point of where the smoke reached all the way down to Tampa, Florida, and we had smoke advisories and you couldn't go outside. It was awful. And then California, as you guys know, has those awful wildfires as well. Sometimes we have them in Florida too. It gets pretty dry here, but nothing crazy like what's been happening up in Canada and in the north and then over out in California. So there is that element and that theme to the song. It has a slow, or not slow, it has a clip, like a news clip of the wildfires that is incorporated in the song. It's very like heart-wrenching. And it is a very dark and chaotic, heavy song. It reminds me a bit of Blut aus Nord's newer type of music that they do on Disharmonium. And just that it's a lot going on. It's sonically just so much sonically happening, and it's emotional and it's exhausting, and it's essentially like a wildfire is ripping through your ears. But it's an incredible song. And I would say it's probably one of the more heavier aspects of this album, if you're looking for the heaviness of it. Just all around, very, just incredible song. So you can go ahead and listen to that. Like I said, it's already up on Bandcamp. And the last song that I want to talk about is my favorite song on the album, and that is the final song called The Blue Against the White. This is a long track. I mean, they all are pretty much long. But this track alone is 15 minutes. Cedar Skeletons is 16 minutes. And then, they're long tracks. But again, if it's clicking with you and if you're enjoying it, doesn't seem that long. But this song essentially is very emotive, and it's very dark, and it's got a very atmospheric feel to it, and it's also got a very heaviness to it because it's a build-up song. But there's his haunting clean vocals in this, and just everything is this feels like an ending scene of a movie, essentially. This whole entire album seems like it could be a movie score for a very, epic, dramatic film. And this feels like this is the ending scene, the end of a movie. That's how you feel when you're listening to this album. and it's fantastic. The song is definitely my favorite, but that's not to say that the other songs aren't as good. They definitely are good. It is hard to just pick out one favorite song, but this was the one that really stuck with me after listening to the album several times. I think I've listened to the album about 8 times now in the last 3 days, so it's been a lot. To say that it's my favorite album of the year, I honestly, this and then Afterbirth's album, and they're two very, very different types of music. I'm a person that generally talks about the brutalness and the heaviness and the death metal and the gurgly vocals and the pingy snares, and that kind of music is pretty much the dominating aspect of this channel. I do talk about black metal a lot on here, but not nearly as much as as I had in the past. I've kind of taken a step back from that and haven't talked about it a whole lot on this channel lately. But for somebody who generally, like 90% of my life, listens to music that is just pretty much what I like to call meat and potatoes death metal, not very personal songwriting, a lot of Cannibal Corpse and their lyrics of dismemberment, bodily dismemberment, and like the horror movie style of death metal. It is a little bit refreshing to take a break from that and listen to something that you are connecting with emotionally and has a little bit more of a personal connection to you in terms of the songwriting and the lyrics that are being written and sang about. And Panopticon definitely is that band for me. I do have several other bands like that. And though that is generally the type of music that I end up falling in love with, and just that's my favorite music. A lot of it, unfortunately, is progressive music because it is that. But in terms of metal music, this is something that I generally wouldn't listen to every single day, but it is something that I, put up very high on a pedestal and think that it's some of the best music ever written as a whole across every musical genre that I listen to. And I don't just listen to metal music. A lot of people know that about me. I'm very into jazz and I'm very into, classic rock. So when something like this comes along, it's a very high praising type of thing for me, and I talk it up a lot, and I try to get as many people to listen to it, and I don't get offended when people don't like it as much as I do. Like, I know it's a lot to connect with, it's a lot to digest, and sometimes people don't want to listen to that kind of music. They just want it to be like, Autopsy or Cannibal Corpse or Deicide or stuff like that, where it's brutal assaulting and riffs and whatever else. And I get that, and I have a lot of friends that are like that. They would never even try to attempt to listen to an album like this. But for me, music is not just about brutalness and riffs and pingy snares. It's about just overall musicianship and being an incredible artist, and that is exactly what Austin is. He is an amazing writer. He's an amazing musician. Just, he plays so many instruments, and like, that's a lot of the things that I grew up on. I have a heavy music background. I played like 10 different instruments, and I was in symphonic band and all that stuff growing up, and just, I learned to play the clarinet when I was like 7 years old. So there's a lot of that I really appreciate, and I really just hold Austin to like epicness. Like, he's incredible with what he does. So this album is a perfect 10 out of 10 for me. And again, I open this up with saying this is a very biased opinion because I absolutely love Panopticon and the work that Austin does. But it is definitely worth listening to, especially if you're into that more of emotional, atmospheric black metal and you don't mind the folkiness that gets added into it from time to time. This is definitely the perfect album for you. So everything will be in the description of where you can buy it, even the Bandcamp. The album doesn't come out until this Friday, so the full entire album is not on Bandcamp yet. It may be, I don't know, Marty, do you usually release stuff earlier? Like how like $20 Min will release it on Wednesday? I don't know. But buy it. It's so good. There's also a bunch of pre-order t-shirts that are in collaboration with the album. I snagged a couple this weekend, thought they were cool looking, so check those out. One thing before I go is one really cool aspect, and I called this out in my Decibel top 40 video last week, is that he is on the cover of Decibel magazine for December. It's his first time ever being on the cover. I thought he had been on it one other time, but I was completely wrong about that. So I say what you want about Decibel. Like, I know there's a lot of people just really hate on him, but this is, in terms of being a musician and having a band, like being on the cover of a really large metal magazine, like that's awesome. So congratulations to him. So this came in ironically the same exact day as my album, so I thought that was perfect. So this is still for sale. You should go check it out. It does have their top 40 list in here as well. But there's some other cool stuff in this magazine. I haven't read Decibel in a long time. But the overall interview in here about the album and everything is really, really good. It's definitely worth reading about. So yeah, pick this up too. So that's all that I have today. I hope you guys had a fantastic holiday week, and it was Thanksgiving in the US this last week. Lots of new content coming out this week. I'm pretty much going to be doing a lot of just album reviews because I got a lot of new stuff that's been coming out and I'm trying to keep up. And then I did a shitload of Black Friday shopping online. I know, so some of that's coming in this week, and you'll see. Some people, like, some of these labels had amazing deals, and it was too hard to pass up. So especially Relapse. Holy shit, I spent a lot of money on Relapse. So all right, that's all I have, and I'll see you guys in the next one.